Good afternoon and welcome to Lunchtime Shares with me, Kim Britz, leading the charge with insights, information, and ultimately effective results in everything coaching, leadership, and marketing. Please remember to like and share and help us grow our channel even further, guys. So joining me today in our marketing and leadership segment, marketing and communications expert, Mr. Craig Page-Lee. How are you doing, Craig?
Kevin, good to be chatting again. And welcome to our listeners on our second episode for 2026. Did you have a productive week, Kev, now that we're back into, the swing of the new year?
Yes, so, I'm ready for 2026, so taking the bull by the horns kind of thing. I know you've also been really busy, and yesterday we had a good conversation about the TV show, so quite excited about where that is going.
Absolutely. Yeah, when you get to the nuts and bolts of costing and trying to establish the slot rates and, who the potential first, second, and tertiary tier brands are, then we know we're going in the right direction.
Yeah, I know. We're almost there. So it's quite exciting. And who knows what 2026 holds. So I'm excited.
Brilliant.
Craig, so what do we have in store for our second episode of 2026?
Yeah, Kevin, so, we're still early in the year, so the trends thing is still quite topical. So we're going to explore 7 key workplace trends coming out of the last 2 conversations where we've definitely been focusing on management, leadership, business, and workplace environment. I thought that's a nice segue into this particular topic. And I'm really keen to expand on the topic because the workplace trends are absolutely already shaping how organizations are operating and how leaders lead and how teams collaborate. But before we review each of the trends in more detail, what are your general observations in respect of seeing the evolution of the workplace into 2026? And what do you think really will be some of those key trends, just as a guess, Kevin?
Greg, so I think the obvious AI conversation is happening. But just in the last week, I saw one of another post, and I see this quite often actually, but another post speaking to the concerns that most companies are thinking that AI is the disruptor and the thing that's going to cause problems in an environment. And someone pointed out that AI it's disrupting. But what people are actually failing in corporates today is not the AI problem, because an AI is a skill, is a question kind of answer relationship. It does what you say, where the human capacity is the one the corporates are actually struggling with humans to be able to get on the change, to really start using the shift skills that I call it the shift skills, where essentially critical thinking, self management, all of these human skills that are actually really creating a problem in corporate. And the last one is something I just heard yesterday called micro shifting, and there's a big pushback. So go and have a look at if you find it, Craig. If I find more information about it, but there's this idea of micro shifting, meaning that a lot of employees are now wanting to do the work when they have time to do the work. So they do not want to be in an environment anymore where it's a 9 to 5 kind of situation, because I think the stats this person used was up to 60% of people who are employed have children and they need attention. So I'll get my work done, but I'm not going to get it done between your work hours. So they micro on how they do what they're doing. It's a sort of a catchphrase. I was like, okay, this is interesting, and the last statement was that we're not living in the revolution where where the world's dictated that we would work from 9 to 5. Things have changed. Life has changed, and we need to get on board with that. But
that's really interesting, because that definitely plugs into one of the key trends that is evident in the conversation today, and that's the whole flexible work structures and hybrid reality. So I look forward to picking up more on the particular term you referenced, but we'll definitely cover off on some of that in the chat today.
Craig, so tell us, what is that first trend we're talking about?
Okay, Kevin, yeah, to start off with, I want to just firstly list all 7 trends and then just provide a reference for the different themes we're going to cover. And the trends are compiled from about 6 or 7 articles that I came across, and some really just simple pull-throughs into this. So quite a nice light touch on the trends. So trend 1 is AI integration and human AI collaboration. Again, talking directly to one of the points you made. Trend 2 is leadership evolution and manager support. Trend 3 is the flexible work structures and hybrid reality. Definitely need to see what they tell us there. Trend 4 is employee engagement crisis and burnout prevention, something that we've always had at the top of a priority list for leaders to really understand. Trend 5 is skills-based hiring and workforce adaptation, I should say. Trend 6 is culture as a competitive advantage, one that I know you're going to appreciate going into more detail in. And then trend 7 is well-being as organizational strategy.
Yeah, I think all of them, Craig. I can't think of anything that's sort of missing from this list, and I think it's quite it's a relevant topic, because even today, as you said, although it's the beginning of the year, these are still things that people really need to, be paying attention to. So I think it's an interesting conversation.
Great. So yeah, let's jump straight into trend 1, which is AI integration and human AI collaboration. And the first major trend really is how AI is transforming from this productivity tool into what Microsoft is actually describing as a team member. I really like that. And this is validated in recent research conducted by the Society for Human Resource Management in the USA, which notes that 92% of chief human resource officers, Kevin, are anticipating greater AI integration into the workforce operations in 2026, and particularly when you see the Geminis and the interface of the Microsoft suites. So what's particularly interesting here is where AI is being adopted versus where humans retain control. And research conducted by Fast Company shows that AI adoption is highest in the early hiring stages at about 39.7% involvement in job postings and 39.5% involvement in resume screening. But AI adoption does drop off significantly for the subjective tasks like final hiring decisions, which is sitting at just 14%, which makes sense to me. And what we learn from this is that organizations are definitely finding this better balance between what is automation and what is actual human judgment. And then, Kevin, for each of the 7 trends that we're picking up on today, there's sort of 4 key takeaways. And the four key takeaways for trend 1 here is AI is evolving from a tool to a team member. Human judgment remains critical for complex decisions. 84% of CHROs expect increased upskilling in AI-specific skills, and success requires a balancing of automation with humanity.
Yeah, Craig, and I think last week we also spoke about it. I touched on the point about having agents, the AI agents that you can now incorporate. I know that Google Workflow has now got that. You can literally tell the AI, do this research, find this information, and I want news on it every single morning. There's also Claude agents. Claude,
yes.
The AI Claude has also now released their agent capability, and it's literally anything from becoming a co-worker to creating websites to just about anything you're looking for. So I think it's a really important point to note that it is becoming a team member, and how effectively can we use the team member. And I think it's going to really lend itself to productivity and getting stuff done that would have essentially taken maybe an hour to do or a day to do, can now literally be done in 10 minutes. So
the critical thing for me, Kevin, is finding the balance and just being honest enough to know when you need to step away from AI and show up as the human, because it is really it's about that the critical decision-making requirements in business, which AI hasn't yet got to. So, don't hide behind it. Don't be lazy. Step in and show up where you need to show up in the right way.
Well, and I think that's also what people are maybe getting wrong to a degree, is just because you can get information quickly and have a lot of information doesn't mean it's, you can rely on it as the only source of information, or you're going to critically use that as the talking point. You still have to have the ability to understand what the AI says, else you're just replacing yourself. So for me, I use it a lot, but I still want to understand what it's saying, why it's saying it, how is it sort of connecting to what I'm thinking. So I'm very challenging on any information and also it always tells you that, these models make mistakes, so you can't use all of it as the truth all the time. So you have to question it too.
Absolutely.
What is our trend number 2, Craig?
Trend 2 is leadership evolution and manager support. And manager support, probably one of the most important components of this statement here. And the second trend is being touted as a critical crisis emerging, Kevin. And the reason being here, according to Gallup research, is that while managers influence 70% of employee engagement, their own engagement is actually falling. And in reality, what this means is that while frontline managers really do hold the primary power to make employees love or hate their jobs, those same managers are increasingly burned out, disengaged, and in many instances unsupported themselves. And the importance of this trend is validated by the fact that for the second consecutive year, 46% of CHROs cite leadership and manager development as their top priority. Interesting in today's day and age that it's still something that hasn't really been achieved effectively. And Kevin, the shift we're seeing is from traditional top-down management to human-centric leadership, something that really you focused on quite extensively, and that this is about emphasizing empathy, emotional intelligence, and the key thing for me, communication.
Great, but on that point, what should organizations be doing to support their managers?
Now, Kevin, they really need to implement 4 critical actions to help support their managers. And these are not difficult to achieve. The first is clarify expectations, really, especially on leading evolving roles and integrating these AI agents. The second critical action is to elevate their voice, expand those strategic responsibilities, and build support systems. It's about coaching, it's about peer communication, real-time guidance, and then finally invest in transitions, structured programs covering the delegation and accountability. And in summary, the 4 key takeaways for trend 2 are noted as follows. Firstly, it's human-centric leadership is replacing command and control. Emotional intelligence really is now a core competency. Manager burnout threatens organizational performance, and transparency in leadership is becoming a critical expectation.
What's interesting about this point to me, Craig, is, and I use the most alarming example to think of is Donald Trump, he goes about doing anything very egocentric, and I'm the boss, you need to listen kind of tactics. It's very autocratic in how he does what he's doing. And on a wonderful world stage, you can see how it doesn't work. It doesn't work. People are scared of him. People don't like challenging him. But behind the scenes, people are going against everything he's doing. So I'm so glad that the human-centric leadership conversation is still the conversation we're having. Because in the world right now, we need it more than ever. It's a really
absolutely.
What about number 3, Craig? Trend number 3.
Yeah, so trend 3 is this reality of flexible work structure and hybrid reality. And this trend addresses something that every organization is still grappling with, Kevin, that of flexible work. And as we clearly know, this experimentation phase is well over, and there really is a significant pushback in some organizations still moving into 2026. Hybrid work is transitioning from temporary arrangements to formalized structures, and organizations really do need to get to understand what this means and how to embed it in their business.
So what are you seeing in terms of how organizations are managing this?
Kevin, they're definitely moving from this sort of loose work from home when needed principle, which interestingly sort of plugs into the concept and term that you cited a short while ago. But they're moving away from these work from home when needed policies to these clearly defined structures. They're specifying exactly which days are remote, which days are in office, and then how teams must stay and work in a connected way. Organizations, however, are definitely faced with the challenge, as findings from DHR Global Research highlights that professional development is the top engagement driver at 71%, ahead of remote work at 63%, and AI tools at 55%. And I think we'll see a shift in that with AI tools really climbing up the ladder. But as flexibility becomes standard, it's a positive impact on engagement is definitely fading. What this means, though, is that while remote and hybrid work models are still highly important, they are no longer the primary differentiator for keeping employees motivated and engaged, and in essence, probably not a primary motivator for soliciting talent. The IMD research highlights a fundamental tension where workers are increasingly seeking these varied contractual formats, from platform work to remote cross-border contracting, while policymakers in organizations are struggling with securing tax revenues through traditional employment models as well. And that really is something I don't think we've even begun to understand the impact on. As these models are changing, the financial relationships and contracts are changing, and there is a net negative impact on the tax generated into any economy, Kevin. In summary, the 4 key takeaways for Trend 3 are, firstly, hybrid work requires intentional structure, not ad hoc policies. Portfolio careers and project-based work are really rising amongst the younger workers. Flexibility is absolutely table stakes across all generations, and organizations must balance this flexibility with the regulatory compliance requirements.
Craig, what I think is also difficult for South Africans versus other international cities and countries is the remote versus in-office kind of work situation. We have the problem that we have is the traveling. You know, in a different city, you can climb on a train and you can get there, and it's public transport. It's easier. It's not sitting in 2 hours of traffic. It's busy, absolutely, but the distance in what we're traveling is significantly different to a different city. And it's one thing that we in South Africans struggle mostly is because we don't have public transport.
But I think there's another layer on top of that as well, which again, it goes to infrastructure, because infrastructure, public transport is infrastructure. But our infrastructure in terms of connectivity is still expensive. In the peri-urban rural environments of South Africa, there really is a challenge. And it's expensive for remote workers to be sitting at home in those environments, high cost of connectivity, high cost of data usage. It is a big challenge. It really is.
Yeah, absolutely. Craig, so what does trend number 4 tell us?
Kevin, trend 4 is employee engagement crisis and burnout prevention. And I'm really interested to see your comments on this particular one. So what's really concerning with this trend, and again, some DHR global data shows that employee engagement has dropped significantly from 88% in 2025 to just 64% moving into 2026, Kevin. 24% decline in 1 year, and this really is something that leaders have to be aware of.
Great. So what do you think the decline of this, or driving the decline at least?
Yeah, so with so many of these challenges that organizations are faced with at this point in time, Kevin, several factors are driving these crises, and 3 points stood out for me in the various articles. And the first is, again, I think something that we've touched on the previous point, is that this novelty of flexible work in AI is definitely worn off. The real point is job security concerns are rising. We're constantly seeing the big global organizations are trimming workforces on a weekly and monthly basis. We're reading about this. And then up to 72% of HR professionals report that workers actually have high expectations of the employees today. And this was validated again by some research by the CHRM. And that's something that organizations need to understand is what are those expectations and what are they putting on the table, and what is the employee value proposition delivering to meet the needs of talent. The critical standout point, however, is that among workers who believe their organization is ineffective at addressing workplace needs, 51% at least somewhat likely to leave within the next year. So in these organizations where workers believe that they're ineffective at addressing workplace needs, more than half of the staff are highlighting the fact that they intend leaving within the next year. That is a major concern, Kevin. And compare that to 91% job satisfaction among those who actually feel their organization is effective. So such a major difference in the intent and the emotional connection with the organization. So organizations are responding with wellbeing initiatives, yes. They do have these sort of scheduled micro breaks. There are clearer boundaries on after-hours work communication, quiet times for focused work, and then definitely training leaders to spot burnout signs. But question is that enough? And then the four highlight reminder key takeaways here are: firstly, engagement is in crisis, reflecting the 20-point decline in the last year. Professional development absolutely remains a top engagement driver. Burnout prevention is shifting from productivity only to actual well-being balance, definitely a good move. And then retention risk is highest where the workplace needs go unaddressed, looking at the positive impact of 91% where they are addressed.
Great, and I think it's a real life concern, and I hear the stats here, and I think it is something that organizations should be aware. I recently was working with a new CEO for who's moving to South Africa for cultural training, and how to what that looks like. And one of the big questions he was asking was, what about people who just leave when you invest your time and money into people? Do they just leave? And I said to him, unfortunately in South Africa, because we're in the crisis that we're in, and jobs are scarce, it boils down, many of the times it boils down to money. If you pay me, I'll stay, but if I get a job that pays me better, I'm going to move. And sadly, it's part of what South Africa's workforce is like. So that high stat of 51% who are likely to leave in the next year, like I can really see that as well, based on
it's a reality. Yeah.
What about Trend 5? What does that tell us, Craig?
Kevin, Trend 5 is skill-based hiring and workforce adaptation. And Trend 5 focuses on this sort of shift from hiring where organizations were moving from credentials-based to now the big term, which is skill-focused recruitment. A real trend that I'm seeing and reading in a lot of the content that comes over my desk. So let's first sort of just clarify what that statement actually means when you're moving from credential-based to skills-focused recruitment. So moving from credential-based to focused recruitment is a fundamental shift in the talent acquisition that actually prioritizes a candidate's actual demonstrable abilities, the hard and soft skills, over traditional qualifications like university degrees, job titles, or years of experience. And it's a strategic response to this rapid evolution of role requirements, persistent talent shortages, and then obviously the need to improve hiring accuracy. And there was a really good read from Robert Walters, USA, who are right at the front end of recruitment, Kevin. The other various articles reference that 39% of today's job skills may actually be disrupted over the next few years. This has been validated in a Deloitte report that noted that 71% of surveyed workers perform work outside of their job scope, actually. So a moment in time for organizations to really get to understand what the role definitions and descriptions are, what the KPIs are constructed around those, and what does that job delivery actually look like, Kevin. And it isn't just a hiring trend, it's actually a strategic response to labor shortage and rapid skill disruption. Obviously, tech and AI really are disruptors in this space, with the result that job descriptions have actually become outdated within months of talent taking on new jobs. And the solution here is just to ensure this continuous learning and adaptability and agileness of the work environment, Kevin.
Great. And it's difficult to hear and believe that that's already happening. I don't know if it's happening in South Africa yet, because we tend to be behind the curve, and but essentially it is true. If you see how people are shifting between position to position, the ability to have that skill focused kind of workforce is also lending it. I mean, some people call it having the generalist approach and looking for generalists who can do more than just this one thing. So it is interesting that it's out in the workforce and happening.
And I think job descriptions to a large degree should have some flexibility, and they dynamic components, and they evolve as the impact of technology and AI is really understood in that particular role. And there's a moment in time when there's a bit more clarity on what that actually looks like, then lock it down. But don't be rigid from the beginning. Allow some of that to have some agility and evolve, Kevin. But to summarize the 4 key takeaways from this Trend 5, the first here again is skills-based hiring is replacing traditional credential requirements. Job descriptions are evolving faster than hiring cycles. Continuous learning is becoming a competitive advantage, and cross-functional work now is the norm, not the exception.
Yeah, I love it. Trend 6 picks up on topic of culture. Craig, so what can you tell us about this trend?
Yeah, I just, as I said earlier, and I know this is a space that's important for you. So culture, Trend 6 is culture as competitive advantage, Kevin. Culture is a topic that you and I both relate to, and we've referenced in the past quite a bit. The key challenge, though, is that the establishment of the right culture in an organization is something that is really executed well. Findings from DHR Global Research notes that 93% of respondents consider workplace culture important, yet only 36% actually feel the culture is well defined and drives performance. And that, for me, is a fundamental gap that really needs urgent intervention.
Yeah, Craig, and yeah, it's still a conversation, and yet there's still so many businesses and corporates that simply don't get this right. It's just, it's almost like they have wonderful ideas about it, but it just isn't working as well. And that's why I think it's still such a because those singular companies that do get it right are leading, far more than any of the companies that get it wrong. There's evidence to prove that. But Craig, so does the research address the topic of inclusion when building the right culture?
Yeah, Kevin, yes, that's a great question, because DEI is a critical component of this. So what we have learned from the various sources that are referenced is that organizations with strong DEI practices are 2.7 times more likely to report high success rates when competing for new business opportunities. And they're also 2.4 times more likely to cite employee satisfaction as a competitive advantage. Another really great learning here is that 47% of chief human resource officers see multi-generational workforces as increasingly important. Great points to learn from here. And when implemented, age-diverse teams that span up to 6 generations bring resilience, adaptability, and enhanced innovation capacity to the business. So, a point that I've never really understood to this extent, but fundamentally important for leaders to lean into this and get to investigate and interrogate their organizations and see how those multi-generational teams are structured and what value they can bring to the organization. In summary, the 4 key takeaways for Trend 6, Kevin, again, recap is culture is an economic driver, not just a nice to have. Inclusion practices directly correlate with business success. Age-diverse teams outperform homogeneous groups, and 31% of CHROs actually now prioritize workplace culture, up from 15% in 2025. Great to see that.
Craig, and also, I've had first-hand experience around working with 6 generations in one room.
Fantastic.
So it is really interesting to see the dynamics that you find between a 20-year-old and a 60-year-old. Like it's quite interesting, and also in the South African context, to a very large degree, we still have that culture that drives, because there's a 66-year-old in the room, please respect the 66-year-old, how you speak, what you say. There's a lot of that still happening. And to the point, if you look at the stats, there is some beautiful takeouts from driving cultures and considering how diverse cultures can function. But Craig,
sorry, just want to jump in there. I'm actually going to pick up on that particular trend in more detail for next week's conversation, or that particular component of Trend 6, because I really think there's some great value for us to take out of that understanding.
Absolutely. So tell us about trend number 7.
Our final trend, Kevin, well-being as organizational strategy. And it's a great trend because I hear leaders in businesses, listed entities in South Africa talk about this quite a lot. So the final theme that ties it all together, and it's really, from the physical workplace being redesigned to support mental health. And sort of 4 examples of this include seeing scheduled micro breaks built into the workflows, clearer boundaries on those after-hour communications being implemented, quiet zones for this focused work being developed, and then obviously tools that encourage being unplugged. That's very, very important.
Yeah, I think one of the things that and probably a few years ago even, Craig, I remember saying to you, the day that you'll have a well-being chief officer in an organization where there's someone who's actually looking after the well-being of the organization and how people function. I mean, just the idea of being unplugged for a time period or having quiet zones, it's very foreign to a lot of businesses in the world, especially in South Africa. But eventually, the importance of people and the well-being of people and what the human capital is capable of doing will essentially become part of the driving force of that business. And when people do that, people function better. It's just a fact.
Absolutely. And Kevin, it actually starts with leadership training. And this really is an important point that I came across in the article, because leadership training is actually now including spotting signs of burnout and encouraging these open conversations about stress. And that really is encouraging. The signals as a shift sort of from viewing well-being as an HR function to recognizing it actually is central to sustainable business performance is a really big positive move. Interestingly, though, as AI is driving productivity gains, some of the experts predict that this could actually enable the 4-day work week. We know some countries have experimented successfully in this. The key here will be whether organizations actually use these efficiency gains to reduce hours or simply just increase the expected outputs. And I think that's where that finite balance really needs to come into play. And the summary, the 4 key takeaway summary points for this trend, Kevin, is well-being is shifting from being a perk to strategic priority. Physical workspace design now really is explicitly supporting mental health, building space into the work environment. Boundaries and unplugging are being systematically implemented, and AI-driven productivity may enable reduced workforce hours.
Craig, and I think, with the right kind of recruitment, which we've already mentioned around recruitment, the right kind of culture with trust and accountability, I think the 4-day work week is something that many companies can achieve, but you need the right culture, and you need the teams to be on board with how that looks, what's the expectations, how you could leverage AI to reduce, the stress of what you're doing. There are so many factors that tie into it, but there are many countries that already do this.
Yes.
A lot of the time I see, Amsterdam's workforce. So when working in the Netherlands, they have a 32-hour work week, and sometimes that fluctuates quite a lot. And you kind of go, well, they're getting it right, and they're breaking down their times down to being far more productive and having time for yourself. And that just makes sense.
Brilliant. Kevin, just in closing from my side, the important things here is that the 7 workplace trends actually share a common thread. And this thread is that the need to balance technological advancements with human needs. To understand the needs and bring the tech advancements and just find that synergistic balance, most important. Organizations that succeed will embrace AI while preserving human judgment, support managers as they navigate these unprecedented changes, formalize these workforce structures, flexible workforce structures, address engagement proactively, not reactively, focus on skills over credentials, treat culture as an economic driver, and make well-being a strategic priority. And then the final key takeaway here is that the workplace of 2026 won't be defined by a single trend, not at all, but by how well leaders actually integrate these into the interconnected changes, into their coherent strategies for the year ahead. And just before we go, I want to just list some of those sources, Kevin, for our conversation today. So the CHROs 2026 State of the Workplace Report, the DHR Global Workplace Trends Report 2026, IMD Workplace Trends for 2026, Fast Company's Key Workforce Trends, the PRSA 6 Workplace Trends Shaping 26, and Gallup State of Global Workplace 2025.
Yeah, and guys, we'll definitely put those references in the description boxes below, so go and check that out. But yeah, Craig, just my final thoughts on this is I think it's interesting to see, as much as the AI conversation's happening, and we keep saying this on the show, there is such an important human element that needs taking. Human
Yes.
always comes to play, right? And according to
absolutely.
clients do not come first, employees come first. If you take care of your employees, they will take care of your clients. Like, there we go.
Very interesting that you actually quote that today, Kevin, because my post on LinkedIn last night was really very much about that. And it sort of looked at the brand expectation gap. It's really great to see that you're picking up on that. The employee experience, just picking up on those 3 points of my post was, the first was, if customers get personalized attention, do the employees receive personalized development? The second point there was, if you promise customers innovation, do employees actually have space to support, and sort of space and support to innovate? And then, the last point there is, if customers experience seamless service, do employees experience seamless internal processes? So, flipping employees to the front of the conversation. I like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, so please join us every week here. Craig and I are steadily heading to our 250th show already, Craig.
I think we're 235 today.
235 today, but we was at 250. And we will be back every week. Tune in, guys, share and like, and please help us support our channel. Craig, have a fantastic week, and I will see you next week then.
Yeah, look forward to that, Kevin. Have a good one too. Thanks. Bye.